Manufacturers are facing extraordinary challenges today. With labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and a changing workforce, complex industrial technology doesn't cut it on the front line. What's needed is a new way of working that will not only meet throughput goals, but change the shop floor culture to one of winning, where every worker feels they play a part in achieving the company's goals for success. What's needed is Red Zone, the connected workforce solution.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We're the editors of Manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News, and we each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we cover the 5 biggest stories in manufacturing and the implications they have on the industry moving forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by giving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email, the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification every Thursday when we go live. Jeff? Every Thursday when we go live, unless a very critical piece of equipment starts on fire right before the broadcast.
Yeah, that was a little bit interesting for producer Eric to deal with, but doing the best we can.
Working through it. So unfortunately, not live this Thursday, but hey, we're still getting one out there. You know, gonna keep everybody happy. Anna, how you doing?
Good. And I just want to point out, star, not literal fire.
Oh, not well. I mean, it was like a mini fire. I mean, just because you don't see the fire, you could tell like there was a fire, just like a tiny electrical fire.
There was some burning going on.
Yeah, just a small.
Yeah, we had the smell of the fire.
Just fire smell.
Inside the
Oh, well,
Yeah.
all right.
It's like
I stand corrected. I was not in here.
if you smell a fire.
Pouncing on you right
Yeah.
there. How could you not know?
Whoa!
What are you thinking?
Right, I've been like fact checked immediately, just like.
I just thought this was standard David, ratcheting things up a notch.
Oh no! It was a blaze in here. We just got it out. Like
Whatever you say.
Yeah, right. No, we're like actually standing in 2 to 3 feet of that foam right now. But you know what? We're pros.
Not safe.
Before we jump into our first story this week, we have a word from our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by Red Zone. Watching employees walk away shortly after spending ample resources training them is incredibly frustrating. And while harder to spot, unengaged or unproductive employees also negatively impact the return on labor investment. A new webinar, Anna actually hosted this one, from Red Zone features experts who discuss the roots of high turnover in manufacturing, how successful leaders support growth for employees, and methods for improving operational visibility. So watch the webinar, How Coil Specialists Tackled Employee Reliability by Leading Well, right now. Anna, why should people download this webinar right now?
Well, I mean, I always have fun when I chat with the folks from Red Zone because they are very timely with their tools that they offer, which are really good at preventing companies from training people and then watching them walk out the door. They're really good at retention and making the workplace fun and trackable. And so I definitely recommend this event if you haven't checked it out yet. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in there.
Well, one thing I like about Red Zone too is they're not just creating content to create content. We get a lot of that. There's just people are just spewing, like any kind of AI generated content out there. But like Red Zone really is particular about the quality they put out there.
Sure.
So check out and see what Coil Specialists has got going on, right? Okay. Our first story this week. Angler's debut desktop injection molding machine after mangled microwave mess. The idea started with a DIY fail. A few fishermen were trying to make homemade fishing lures, but it turned into a melted plastic disaster in the microwave. Likely also a loss. The team couldn't believe there wasn't a better way to make soft plastic parts at home. So the small team of engineers from Texas and Hong Kong started building a prototype. That prototype became the Salt Gator. SaltGator is the world's first desktop soft gel injection molding machine recently unveiled on Kickstarter.com, the crowdfunding platform. The SaltGator heats, mixes, injects, and even recycles soft plastics using an enclosed soft touch or cool touch design. The entire process, from heating to demolding, takes less than 15 minutes with no exposed heat sources, fumes, or special ventilation required. Smaller than your coffee maker, it takes about 10 minutes to heat the material, 3 minutes for it to solidify, all typically in a 3D printed mold. The SaltGator had a modest goal of raising $15,000 with the initial product launch. The company has now raised $333,758 from 1,295 backers, with 35 days still to go. Anna, while SaltGator is the crowdfunding platform's latest success, the team now faces what could be its more difficult challenge: building a company.
I'm sure they'll figure it out. No, I mean, I was impressed that they actually did this based on just the idea. You know, I mean, that's like, I know they say the idea is the hardest part. I think building the company is the hardest part. But when I first saw this, my first impression of it was, okay, so, you know, obviously this is injection molding, a little bit different from 3D printing, which we've seen a lot of like consumer interest in.
Yeah.
But I liked the idea of like marrying the DIY and the applicability of these this into one device, and kind of how approachable the design is. Because when you look at some of the at-home stuff you can do with a 3D printer, for example, even some of the desktop versions, I feel like are a little bit intimidating for the lay person. You got all your spools, like they're just, some of them are really, you know, sizable, and they look like they just take a lot of know-how to operate. This thing with its like plunger and I mean, you really feel like I could produce something on my own using this, and I could maybe figure it out. Just me looking at it, I thought, well, maybe I could figure this out.
Oh yeah.
And you know, fish, whether it's fishing lures or a squishy kids toy, because those types of plastics are really popular right now with kids toys and fidgets and things like that.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you got a million people who are looking at this and thinking, what kind of an Etsy store could I make?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
to sell unique wares, or how could I mold something unique? And I think it was exciting because it gets people's thoughts kind of moving in that direction of how they can be makers. Maybe they don't assume that they can do that, you know?
Yeah.
So, long story short, I think like the design of it really felt like you could look at it and, you know, think I could use that. And I thought that was actually the most impactful thing about it.
Well, and I mean, not just Etsy stores, but man, I was just at a farmer's market, and these farmers markets and craft fairs, I feel like are more than 50% 3D printed products, now potentially injection molded products. And you know another reason I think that it's easier for us to wrap our head around this one is because we're just familiar with injection molding, right? Like this reminded me of the jewelry class that I took in high school, because I made a mold, I melted metal, I poured it in the mold, I made a product, right? And it's very similar to this, where it's like make a mold, inject the soft gel into it, create a product. And, you know, I just think that injection molding's been around a little bit longer, and it's easier, and really kind of kudos to SaltGator for the marketing efforts that they have, because they really do pre-sell this product.
Yeah.
Jeff, you know, I kind of wanted to get into the likelihood of some of these Kickstarter projects actually succeeding. But, you know, before I do that, when you look at the SaltGator, other than having just a great name, and one that doesn't necessarily scream injection molding, you know, nothing says injection molded soft plastics than SaltGator. But what were your thoughts on this project, and were you kind of surprised by the success it had out of the gate? I mean, it's only been up for 7 days.
Yeah, especially because, like you guys have been talking about, it's injection molding. It's not a 3D printer, and just that in and of itself screams less DIY than some of the other things that you would see on Kickstarter. I think that this whole dynamic with DIYs, though, is very interesting. There's just this core group that really wants to do things on their own. And it sort of flies in the face of a lot of other trends we're seeing. In manufacturing, we see mass customization, and that's a bigger part. Design for manufacturing has been a movement for the last decade. So we know there's more customization from customers on all levels wanting something specific for them. But then we also see a lot of things where it's about efficiency and it's about not having to deal with that, whether we're talking about going to a restaurant instead of making food at home, or the way we stream and consume content, or and a lot of these other things. It's focused on efficiency. This isn't the most efficient way, or probably the most cost-effective way to do a lot of the things that you're going to do with this piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that there is such a surge. And no, I never would have thought this would be the one that blows away its Kickstarter goals by 200 or by 20 times, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I would never have thought something like this. And for me, it's always also looking at some of the basic stuff like the materials.
Mm-hmm.
This is the soft gel plastics. This is something I was not familiar with.
Yeah.
I was very surprised to learn how easy it is to get.
Yeah.
I mean, you can order this stuff off of Amazon if you wanted it.
Yeah.
So not only can you get it from them, but there's other ways to go, which is great for them as well.
Yeah.
Bigger picture, all this desktop, this is molding. We talk about 3D printing a lot. You just wonder where it could go from here.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my mind initially goes right to medical and military.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, we're going to get to a place where you're going to go to the doctor's office, and if they need to print anything from tubing to a heart stent, it's not come back in a week when we have what we need to do it. We're going to make what we need. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do this procedure now. Yeah. And that's exciting when you think down the road or the thing that leads to the thing.
Yep.
And this is where it could take us. Same thing in a military situation. I think I've used this example before. When you're disassembling the rifle, we always had a pin that held the firing pin in place, attached to the bolt carrier. It's about that big. And somebody always lost one. Yeah. So as opposed to going back to the armor or basically having this, 7-pound piece of useless equipment, you could print one in the field and be ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's where all of this, I think, is going to eventually lead. So it's always exciting to see new advancements or the next evolution in this type of product.
Well, and they were very specific to say this is not just for DIYers. This is for designers and engineers to have on their desk as well. And I do think that part of the reason this was successful is that we've seen kind of a growth in the mold making market where people are making like plaster casts of things, plaster molds, and then pouring plastics and other materials into them to create products. So I think that it's very accessible. And I don't know, I think it's really cool. It also, one thing I like about it is that it takes the last no away from fishermen, right? Because like the last excuse is just like, oh, you know what? I didn't have that one lure with me. And it's just like, here you go. Print it, mold it, get it out there. And in 15, just like, again, not now, but think about like, one day on your boat, you could like realistically have like this cheap consumer product 3D printer, like, and in a little injection molder and just like, hey, make whatever lure you want right there.
Sure.
I mean, niche.
I mean, people have put crazier things on their boats. Okay, I'll go along with it.
Sure. But I mean, this whole project exists because a bunch of guys put a bunch of old lures in a Pyrex glass, started melting them down in a microwave, and somehow thought that they were going to create like the equivalent of creepy crawlers. I just, I like it. Like, it was something that I maybe thought of when I was a little younger. But sorry, before I digress too much, I wanted to get into just the likelihood of some of these projects actually succeeding. So more than 40% of projects launched on Kickstarter reach their funding goals. About 15% of all these projects fail to raise a single dollar. And SaltGator is actually classified as a gadget, which falls under the technology category. There have been about 58,000 total tech projects, right? Only 24% of those have been successfully funded. Only 5.3%, Anna, raised the kind of money that SaltGator had. And that's why I was kind of curious about like, now you got to start a business. Now you got to make sure you have your supply chain in check, because of the top 12 biggest Kickstarter fails of all time, 11 are actually from the tech product category. And they failed for so many reasons, like cost overruns or just, straight up fraud, like technology that wasn't real. So really excited, but this type of gadgetry, you got to just proceed with caution. So hoping for the best from Saltgator. And we'll keep talking about it if you guys actually send us one like you said you would.
They got a lot of work to do.
I know.
They've got a lot of orders there that they were. Because, I mean, if you look at $15,000, that's like, what, about 10 or 12 units?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, what are they like? Because they retail for like $400.
I thought it was more than that. Okay.
Maybe that's an initial order, but 400. So, like, 30?
Yeah.
They got to start pumping out a few more than that.
Couple.
All right. Our next most popular story this week. 370 million mile Hail Mary saves camera aboard NASA's Jupiter orbiter. In December 2023, a mission team led by Southwest Research Institute executed a deep space move to repair the JunoCam imager on the Juno spacecraft. That's the one that NASA sent up to take pictures of Jupiter, kind of everything around it. At the time, the camera was trying to take pictures of one of Jupiter's 95 moons. There's a fun fact for you. About 2 weeks ago, SWRI discussed this mission at IEEE in Nashville. JunoCam is a camera responsible for several important scientific discoveries. The camera's optical unit is actually located outside a titanium-walled radiation vault, which protects the other sensitive electronic components. The location is tough because Juno flies through some of the most intense planetary radiation fields in the solar system. The camera was expected to survive 8 orbits of Jupiter. Through the first 34, it was nearly flawless, but by orbit 56, nearly all of the images coming back were corrupted. The team knew that the issue was likely tied to radiation, but it was kind of hard to nail down a root cause of a camera 370 million miles away. Some clues pointed to a damaged voltage regulator, but they didn't have a lot of time to get it done. The moon pass was just weeks away. The team turned to a process called annealing, where a material is heated for a specified period before slowly cooling. If you're unfamiliar, the idea is that heating the material can reduce defects in it. The team raised JunoCam's heater to 77 degrees Fahrenheit and then kind of just waited. But soon after this process finished, it began cranking out new crisp images. The spacecraft has now orbited Jupiter 74 times, and it looks like the camera might be ready for another repair job. Jeff, this is just an incredible story, and the lessons learned are not only exceeding the mission's expectations, but are likely going to be used on other missions and in other applications in the future. And I think that's why, this one was kind of a surprising one to me that it was in our top 5, but it's an incredible story.
No, very cool story. And I think it exemplifies if NASA ever needed justification for a lot of things that they're doing, this shows why. This is why we do these types of things, not just for space exploration, but like you alluded to, other applications here on Earth. When it comes to how metals respond and react to radiation, seems like we got some things going on here at home that we could definitely use that for when it comes to energy production, for example, with all of these new AI farms springing up and companies wanting to, server farms for support AI activities springing up and people looking at their own nuclear reactors to essentially help power some of these and take some of the strain off the grid. Yeah, this could be good stuff to know and fall back on. And it's really interesting when you look at these programs as well, because I think at first glance, you could say, why do we care about a Jupiter, like a moon in Jupiter? Or another thing that's also tied into this New Horizons mission, which is like going out to Pluto and taking a look at the outer solar system. This is why we do that.
Yeah.
Because we want to see how things react in different environments. And it's especially important, I think, to look at because right now the current budget that President Trump has submitted, and it's a preliminary one, it's not finalized or anything like that, but he's looking to make cuts up to like 25% in NASA's budget. I'm all for being responsible, fiscal spending, holding agencies accountable. And NASA, I'm sure, has some waste built in there someplace.
Yeah.
But this is one of the missions that would be cut in that budget. In addition to streamlining, if you want to use that term, or cutting NASA's headcount by about 6,000 people, by about a third, they're also going to be eliminating a lot of STEM spending. These are things we need to look more closely at. Again, there is a level of accountability, but we've just shown how one of these projects essentially paid for itself with the additional knowledge that we're able to obtain.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do it without some really smart people there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we start looking at an agency like NASA, a 25% budget cut, a 6,000 head count cut. That seems extreme. It seems like there are ways that we can make this work. Let's be a little bit more judicious in the way we approach some of these attempts at being more fiscally responsible. So it was just interesting to see those things sort of coincide here.
Well, and it always riles me up when people, because this can be oversimplified, right? Just you get a politician up there that says, millions of dollars to repair a camera around Jupiter, 370 million miles away. How about we use those millions of dollars here in America? And then it's just that simply oversimplified political points that they're just jockeying back and forth, when instead you could say, well, one of the very few things that we learned from this mission could already be applied to robotics as they get smarter and learn how to heal themselves. We talk about self-healing materials all the time. That is the future of the manufacturing industry, and we need to make sure that we continue to fund and fuel this base that we continue to grow upon. We can't just pull the rug out from under everything. Anna, before we go just diving down political waste and spending and justification, what were your thoughts on some of this? And actually, I've got to give all the credit to you, because this story we actually found because of your, in case you missed it, last week, found this story from SWRI, and it wound up being in the top 5.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that because last week when we, my in case you missed it that I brought up in case you missed it last week was about SWRI and a project that they were doing where they were testing, I think it was called Next Car.
Yeah.
It was a project where they were basically automating out people's poor driving habits and making already existing hybrid vehicle 30% more efficient to drive.
Yeah.
And just the technology, all three of us, I think, just kind of blew us away. But I made a comment then about how I wasn't super familiar with SWRI. Well, look, here they are on the podcast again, second consecutive week. So I decided to educate myself a little bit, and I went back and I looked at their website and at all of the press releases that they've issued in the last couple of months. And there are a lot of them. And the reason is because they are like absolutely prolific in terms of like making actionable progress on the most exciting stuff. And it's very diverse. And so I just grabbed a couple just to give you an idea of some of the other things that they're working on. SWRI is working with University of Austin to evaluate a promising approach to improve long-term carbon storage in depleted oil and gas reservoirs. Mm-hmm. They've also gained a $250 million contract with the Air Force to help extend the life of aging military aircraft through assessing 4 aircraft that were introduced in the 60s and 70s and looking at their structures and assessing material degradation to make those last longer. And then also meanwhile, they also fabricated 2 bed netting prototypes targeting malaria-causing blood parasites.
Ooh.
3 like very exciting projects, 3 completely different projects. This is just stuff that they have done in the last couple of months that they're talking about in the industry. I found it very inspiring just to go on their website and look at that. But I think, just to wrap this all up in a nice bow, all of the points that you guys are making around, what feels kind of like a race to the bottom on science right now. And some of these projects getting targeted because they don't pay back or they're too expensive or whatever we view there, or even targeting the people who maybe come from other countries that aid in that research and now they're worried about if they're safe here or they're this is the kind of stuff that is being done. And so if we target science and STEM and all this stuff in our cost-cutting initiatives, yes, I agree. We need to be more judicious. We need to look at actually all of the capabilities that are being developed here and, what they can do for public health, for the environment, for the military. There's just so many things that you can take away from this.
Well, and what was the plan before, right? Lead in innovation, manufacture globally, right? If we're going to manufacture domestically, where's the justification for falling behind in innovation?
Agree.
And engineering prowess? Anyway, if that was too quiet, turn it up. All right. Green Steel startup says it can undercut China. Hertha Metals is a clean steel production startup. The company says it has successfully demonstrated a single-step process for turning low-grade iron ore into molten steel or high-purity iron. A pilot plant in Texas has been churning out 1 ton of steel per day for months. Next year, the company plans to build a new facility capable of 9,000 tons per year. Then it's going to scale to 500,000 tons per year, which will be on par with commercial United States micro mills. Hertha uses a proprietary furnace that not only turns these less desirable materials into valuable resources, but it's 30% more energy efficient than conventional steel making. The furnace also runs on domestic natural gas or clean hydrogen and can cut emissions from 50% to 98%. Hertha's system can integrate directly into existing steel mills, which means producers won't need entirely new facilities if they want to adopt the technology. Even smaller plants could operate profitably due to Hertha's modular design. Jeff, now this technology does have its champions, including one Mr. Bill Gates, who recently invested $17 million, about 1/10,000th of his net worth, still in this company. Do you think this technology can help the U.S. create a reliable domestic supply of steel and high purity iron?
It can help everybody do that, okay? And let's just be clear, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, cleaner is better. Okay, It doesn't matter what it is. If your machinery, if your operation is running more cleanly, that's less maintenance, less energy costs, all those things. So the things I'm about to say are not meant to be negative about this technology in any way, shape, or form. Just want to offer some perspective in terms of what we're really dealing with here when it comes to becoming globally competitive based on any singular technology or company.
Yeah.
Okay, the world's leading steel producer, China. Roughly 55% of all steel made on this planet comes from China. 1 billion metric tons. 1 billion metric tons.
Yep.
The U.S., number 3 in the world. 80 million metric tons. Okay, 1 billion.
Yeah.
80 million. A big difference, right? Nucor, the number 1 U.S. steel manufacturer, 30 million metric tons of steel annually. They want to scale up at some point to 1/2 of 1 million metric tons.
Yeah.
Great. Good stuff. Not complaining, just saying, if I'm producing this technology, how can I only look domestically when it comes to rolling it out and providing it as a resource?
Yeah.
When we're looking at that small of a market in comparison to where it could be. Because this is the type of technology, yes, we would want to keep this here in the U.S. to be more competitive from an energy usage perspective, because energy is, after raw materials, the most expensive part of making steel. But how do you do that? How do you contain this to make it just a U.S.-based technology? This is, if you really want to capitalize on it, because it's a company that likes to make money at some point, how do you not expand to other parts of the world? So as far as sort of shifting that balance in domestic steel manufacturing, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool technology that could really revolutionize things globally when you look at how it can reduce energy consumption and pollution.
Yeah.
That's where I think the impact is. I don't think it's going to be the turning point for domestic steel manufacturing here in the US.
I think that's part of the sales pitch. I think that's the hey, look at us over here at the 1/2 of 1 million, while we're reinventing the drop in the buckets, again, they've just done the pilot plant. They're looking to scale. And I think if you can make the pitch, hey, this can make the U.S. more competitive, then it starts making people like you think about well, why just the U.S.? Why not? I mean, and obviously, why not China? But China's just sitting there because not yet. But I think it gets that conversation going, whereas maybe it doesn't get that kind of run. I don't know. But if you say, hey, we have the technology, it's relatively plug and play. I
understand how energy is going to, trickle down and impact costs to the end user. Whoever's buying the steel hopefully can be at a lower cost. We're more competitive along that way. I just don't see it scaling up to a point right now.
Yeah.
Maybe eventually over decades and decades if it really takes off. But immediate impact, other than having a lot of the positive benefits for those who are producing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how this impacts globally.
Well, and I feel like we, luckily, given how long we've been at this, building the second most popular podcast in the manufacturing industry, but with as long as we've been doing it, we've been able to see some of these projects truly come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And so while for every one of these that recover, that is just like, wow, that's great, what next? And then we never hear from it again. I think because we've seen some of those stories actually turn into commercialized products, I don't know, that helps me when I see a story like this think, hey, it's got a chance.
Yeah. And, of course, scale is always easier said than done. But I do, like, if you look at what some of the things that Hertha is trying to do here, I don't think they're saying that they're going to try to overtake China in terms of raw steel output. But if you look at some of the stuff they are doing, so they talk about rare earth magnets, that specific issue, and what they could do there. So right now, the U.S. imports 25% of its finished steel and more than 90% of the high purity iron used in rare earth magnets, the latter almost entirely from China. So the idea here is that because the U.S. is making so much of its steel for use using scrap, that they're not able to produce enough high purity steel to be used in those rare earth magnets.
Okay.
Hertha says that they can solve that problem with their process. So they can allow those companies who are already in the steel industry, maybe not replace what they're doing, but like augment it with this ability to produce more high purity steel to use in those specific applications, which are growing applications that we do need more materials for.
Mm-hmm.
So, the word undercut, I think you can kind of take it however you want. I mean, they could take a piece of that specific market that is like a niche part of the materials industry, but it is also a very important one when you think about, what these magnets are being used for and how much we need. I read an interesting quote from Rajesh Swaminathan of Khosla Ventures, who said that, so they're using the Hertha process. He says that Hertha's single-step tunable process doesn't just materially lower cost and energy use, it fundamentally expands the company's capacity to produce iron and steel at scale by unlocking a wider range of iron ore feedstocks. This means the U.S. is able to both secure and accelerate its production of critical iron and steel and bring back domestic manufacturing. So, again, I think it's like, can we make inroads in this very specific niche within the steel industry and kind of bring some of that back so we don't have to, source it all from China?
Yeah,
that's a good thing. I mean, I do think that undercuts China a bit in that area. It's not, we're not going to replace China. But if we can find a way to kind of, build a better mousetrap, then we can make some progress there.
So let me ask you this. If you're the consumer, the buyer of steel, and it's made using this process, but it's still a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
Does this impact your purchasing decision? The fact that you can buy it in the U.S., it was made in a better way, let's just say that, generally speaking. Are you willing to pay more for it?
Well, it really depends right now on the tariff situation because we've seen the metals get included heavily in that. So I don't know what the cost per we're looking at.
My point is that understanding the tariffs will play a role in that, but if it still costs the same or more,
it always comes down to cost.
Does this impact your decision?
Or but if it only comes down to cost, it never does. That's the thing. And you see these companies that are trying to decouple from China because they have so many supply chain problems. Mm-hmm. There's so many challenges getting that stuff from there to here. Anytime you're beholden to a supply source that's thousands of miles away, a lot of companies would rather not deal with that. And there's some security in knowing that they have the stock, the quality, and they have hands on that process in an integrated way. I can see that being appealing to some companies.
Well, and in terms of diversifying the supply chain, I mean, we've seen it even when it comes down to packaging, right? There are more sustainable options for packaging. And when it comes down to even a penny difference, they still want whatever's cheapest. However, if they can, typically U.S. production can't meet everybody's needs. So if they can diversify a little bit by getting some from the U.S. and then other global resources, I think that people would be willing, or I think that people would invest in that.
I would like to think you're right.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but I still think one of the reasons U.S. steel production is down is because it's cheaper to source it from someplace else. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
That's why U.S. Steel and Nucor and everybody else produces less steel.
Yeah.
It's because the market's flooded with cheaper product options.
Yeah.
So, look, I'm rooting for these guys. Don't get me wrong. I want it to work. I want it to be a competitive advantage for anybody who uses it. But I think there has to be a practical perspective on it as well in terms of, is this really a competitive advantage?
Yeah.
And history says maybe not.
No, I think that at the end of the day, the first thing everybody looks at is cost, right? But I think that what the last 3 to 5 years has taught us is that there are so many other things that factor into that equation now that people are actually taking seriously. All right. Our next most popular story. It ain't no lie. Toymakers are saying bye to batteries.
I can't believe you kept that headline.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe you didn't sing it.
Mm-hmm. This is for both of you and everyone out there. You're welcome. Since the beginning of President Donald Trump's effort to realign the U.S.'s position in the global manufacturing landscape, many have questioned the impact tariffs will have on the toy industry. According to the Toy Association, about 80% of toys sold in the United States are imported from China. According to Reuters, toy makers are looking for ways to further cut costs to cushion the blow from a 30% blanket tariff on Chinese goods. And it is translated into product and packaging redesigns. And the first to go are batteries. Toy makers are also reducing accessories like fewer plates in toy kitchens, less makeup on dolls, all while still increasing prices and using cheaper packaging. CEO of toymaker Basic Fun, Jay Foreman, told Reuters, it's pretty simple. The consumer will either pay more or get less. These design overhauls typically take about a year to implement, and while companies are cutting the number of products in their portfolio in the interim, they still need something on shelves this holiday season. Anna, maybe not this holiday buying season, which Grandma has already informed me has already begun and needed those lists, but by next Christmas, do you think we will see drastic changes in the toy industry landscape?
I don't think this is an issue that is exclusive to toys. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a lot of unique ways in which manufacturers are responding to increased input costs and looking for whatever opportunities available, short of increasing costs for many of them. And toy makers, I think, making you buy your own batteries would be one of those. We're not increasing your costs, but we are. Mm-hmm. We're also seeing reports of shrinkflation kind of quietly ramping back up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's impacting, I think, nearly every category of CPG and food products once again.
And toys. Less plates in the kitchen sets.
Fewer plates, less makeup.
Less makeup. Shrinkflation on Barbie's face.
Eyeshadow on one eye only. Weird, but
yeah.
No, I also read, so it's beginning to be reported that automakers are adjusting by, and this is according to Car Scoops, a mix of sneaky add-ons, reduced perks, and behind-the-scenes adjustments that don't show up on the sticker. So according to this recent report I read, you're seeing OEMs that are dropping financing specials. They're increasing things like destination charges or delivery fees so they can defend not raising the sticker price. But the all-in costs for buyers are actually still going up. And in a nod towards this toy industry method, Car Scoops also said that buyers should be on the lookout for vehicle models that are suddenly losing features that were there before and used to come as standard. And now they're being expected to pay for those features. It's a good way to pretend like you're not raising costs, but you actually are. And I think it's pretty easy to see that these not raising cost methods are ultimately increasing costs for consumers in the end. And so, like, on the one hand, you want to encourage shoppers to be savvy and pay attention to what it is that they're getting and how much they're paying for what they're getting. On the other, you just don't have that much control over it, mm-hmm. So it's like, I think we're just going to be victim to some of these tactics if we want those products. And unfortunately, that's just the way things are changing. And, I think we're still in that sort of strange interim period where if these tariffs stick around, so far, we've seen a lot of companies try to kind of swallow those tariffs. They've tried to absorb the costs of those tariffs rather than pass them along. If these tariffs are permanent, as they are suggested to be, and we've got a deadline that's coming up tomorrow, so after this podcast airs, we will know more about what's happening there. At some point, retailers, manufacturers, they're not going to be able to do that forever. So those prices are going to start to either, I don't know if it's going to be inch up, or if it's going to be like a thunderous quarter.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen.
Well, it's, P&G just kind of came out and said like, hey, the thunderous quarter is coming, and I'd like that. I think it's a really good point to show the changes that are happening in the auto industry right now, because I think it's really easy to discount. Like, it's really easy to say like, hey, instead of $30, your kid's going to get 2 or 3. I think it's really easy to say like, does a doll become less playable because it doesn't come with a purse? But I mean, when we're talking about actual features on a car that, people are either accustomed to, or it could be seen as safety features that, are otherwise used to come standard. Those are real world impacts that, can't be so easily dismissed.
Yeah. I mean, it's food, it's laundry detergent, it's things that people buy every day, are all of which are going to be, implicated in this very wide reaching strategy.
Well, and I have to say, I even poked fun at this part of the audience where I said, like, it's going to raise the ire of the back in my day. We used to have to buy our own batteries. I mean, that was just, you guys remember those Christmases? It was like all the kids unwrap the gifts, and then there was the delivering of the batteries. And man, just to no fail, first comment a second after I published this, you know what? We used to have to buy our batteries. It's like, oh, okay, man, good. Let's keep going backwards. All toys used to be wood too. You want to just keep whittling toys for Christmas?
Are you trying to pick a fight?
Huh?
You're trying to pick a fight here, David.
Oh, they picked the fight. Fight's happening. Jeff, what are some of your thoughts on, shrinkflation in toys and in automotive and kind of everywhere else where you might see people kind of carving things up?
Could you make that a broader question?
Yeah. Jeff, shrinkflation and your life going forward.
So first of all, batteries. The batteries you always got with stuff sucked anyways.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't Duracells they were throwing in there with stuff. So, I mean, you had to replace them in a couple of weeks. Anyway.
They were like ever ratty.
Yeah. So, I mean, and a lot of these other things, they talk about necessity being the mother of invention. And I think in some cases, when your back's against the wall, there can be some positive things that come out of that. Whether it's, if you have to be smarter about your packaging, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. If you have to reevaluate a lot of these things to streamline and cut your costs and be more efficient, you can realize some things that you should have done in your operation before.
Yeah.
Okay. So there can be some positives that come out of that. However, I don't see that happening here. When we were looking at this specific instance with toys, we've seen Hasbro has already cut their workforce.
Yep.
We've seen other toy makers going out of business or not innovating. We did a story not too long ago about how R&D costs have been slashed at a lot of learning toy companies because of tariffs.
Yeah.
So it is impacting this particular segment very abruptly and very hard. There's even been studies that said, okay, if we don't have new products coming out, new toys for kids to be playing with, that's going to have a negative impact on some of their learning growth. So I don't want to get too dramatic down that road, but there are trickle-down effects here of these tariffs from a very real perspective in terms of job loss, in terms of costs, but also what happens when this starts getting to a point where you have to start cutting things to stay competitive that you wouldn't want to cut? Talking about quality.
Yeah.
You make the automotive reference in features and benefits. Okay, it sucks to maybe, this is an extreme, I couldn't imagine this being the case, but if you didn't have air conditioning as a standard feature in your vehicle, that sucks, but you can open the window and get by on it.
Yeah.
Now, if all of a sudden you're stuck with giving your kids maybe inferior products, okay, if He-Man's head keeps falling off every time they go to play with it, eventually they're not going to anymore. And then they're not going to come back to your product. And why are you going out of business? Well, it wasn't just because of the tariffs increasing the prices and they were more expensive. It's because you had to make cuts in quality that are impacting things on a bigger picture. That's what I worry about. Margins on toys are already pretty tight. We know how much stuff is outsourced and how much is brought in from China already to help save on those costs. That's where I worry about this rolling downhill. People start making sacrifices in quality, starts affecting sales. Companies go out of business. Logistics people and distributors are hurt. Retailers are hurt. it just has a much bigger effect, which is why when we talk about these tariffs, we've always talked about the need to be more precise and more surgical and really try to support competitiveness in certain areas where we need them. This is where it's hurting us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other ones that you guys have mentioned as well. So when we talk about how folks are adapting, shrinkflation is just a natural tactic. That just makes all the sense in the world, whether it's food or toys or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I worry when it gets to the quality point.
Hasbro cut staff, said it's raising prices. Right now, Mattel is just raising prices, but you could see other, cuts to get a little leaner down the road. But it's okay, Jeff. I mean, if we have to make cuts to quality of STEM products and, luckily, there's still plenty of funding for other STEM Oh, wait. No, there's... Oh, no. Vaccaro said on our site, why should I care about cheaper packaging? I'm buying the contents and the packaging is just filling up our landfills. Well, I think that's a really good point. One thing is that toy makers have been making packaging more playable. And so it's not just packaging. Like when they open up the toy, it becomes part of the play set. So that way it doesn't wind up in a landfill. But it also means that, maybe people are picking a cheaper, less recyclable packaging as well, and maybe not making the most eco-friendly decisions there. You guys got any feedback for Vaccaro there?
I do find that some of the hard plastics and the double layers and things that are a little bit over the top. I know that some of that is just because of the long time they spend in transit and just protecting those products from damage. But yeah, when you get something and it is like breaking that Barbie doll out of a prison cell, some of that is a little bit over the top, and I would be just fine with a little bit less intense material.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, obviously they have made those more expensive selections probably for a reason. They don't want to spend more money on packaging.
Mm-hmm.
So it is probably, a defense against returns and things like that.
Well, in terms of, to Jeff's points, creating opportunity to innovate new solutions, like when they started using ties that were made out of paper in packaging. I mean, I remember the first time I opened a toy and everything was tied down with paper. And I was like, that's just, we're talking about tiny little pieces, but millions and millions of those little pieces that used to be plastic that are now paper. And I think, changes like that can do a lot of good. All right. Our most popular story this week. More manufacturing professionals say tariffs will hurt industry. In a flash poll conducted by Industrial Media, that's our parent company, we asked manufacturing and engineering professionals, how will tariffs impact U.S. manufacturing? Within 24 hours, we received more than 200 responses. 56% of respondents believe tariffs will hurt U.S. manufacturing. 44% say it will help it. According to reports, the costs of tariffs increasing let me get that back again. According to the report, the costs of tariff increases are starting to materialize for U.S. manufacturers that depend on global supply chains. Sorry, just didn't want to get that one wrong. A recent analysis suggests that factory costs could increase by roughly 2 to 4.5%. Anna, are you surprised by how narrow that split is? And is it indicative of how much of the industry is still in a holding pattern when it comes to tariffs?
Yeah, I thought the results were interesting, especially considering that the narrative that's been built by the administration, that really this is a strategy executed in support of U.S. manufacturing. So why is there so much concern from IN, the manufacturing industry itself?
Yeah.
But I think obviously, as you mentioned, like the rollout has borne such a high impact on input costs for so many of these companies. And then also the lack of transparency that's just made everybody a little bit edgy about what their customers are going to do. That puts the people at the center, those who are very vulnerable to cost-cutting measures in manufacturing, the workers, maybe nervous about what happens if costs go up or if prices go up or if people stop buying the products that they produce, which is a very fair concern to have. because many of these policies, as we've seen, have some winners and some losers domestically. It's not just foreign companies that are bearing the brunt of lost business. That's not the only impact that we see here. And an example of that is yesterday, the White House issued a final order on copper tariffs. They put a 50% duty on semi-finished products like pipes, rods, wires, but not on raw input copper material, which is what people were expecting. People were not expecting the way it was rolled out. So it sent the copper industry kind of into this strange free fall.
Okay.
And analysts believe that the tariffs are likely to feed through into price increases for consumer goods in construction. Copper is something that you see a lot in things like HVAC equipment. It's heavily used in electrical and in construction projects, things like that. CNBC also interviewed Russ Bukowski, president of the manufacturing software company Mastercam. I'm sure you guys have heard of them.
Oh, yeah.
Who said that these copper tariffs are going to hurt manufacturers in the long run and lead to higher production costs. To stay afloat, manufacturers may have to pass these costs to consumers, which will likely drive up prices on various goods. This is the same thing we continue to see over and over and over again. And I think, of course, too, it goes without saying that we have this August 1st deadline, which, again, by the time you get this, audience, that will have passed. We'll see where we're at. But, already today, in another extension for Mexico, and the president has already said he will continue to negotiate with folks even after the deadline. So there is still this real lack of transparency here. There are still so many questions about what's going to be involved and how, and you do not have any certainty, I think, from the Trump administration that any of this stuff is said and done, that it has any permanence whatsoever, that you should be making long-term business decisions based on these policies, because we just don't know. We still don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone feels good about where we're at still. And I almost think maybe never will, because it's been so, knee-jerk. And it's like the shifting tides every couple of weeks. When will it feel like something that you could build a policy around, and where the manufacturing industry could start to feel secure and understand where their future lies? I think that's what we're taking away from this data, is just some of the jitters that the manufacturing industry is feeling because of that.
Well, and I think this poll and other feedback that I've heard from other people in the industry, people are still being fairly level-headed as to their approach to tariffs and their expectations and their realization and kind of trying to navigate the unknown, right? Like while we do have some just straight party line champions out there that are just kind of almost talking nonsensically, what they say is in favor for the industry. And sometimes it doesn't always come off that way to me. But I mean, a lot of reports said that, there's no guarantee that this overhaul of trade policy is going to deliver the happy ending that it's promised. This is according to the AP, kind of piggybacking on your point, Anna. It says agreements are sparse on details, and most of these trade deals require months, even years of negotiation that kind of rise and fall with the tiny details, right? And it's wild because I think that it still surprises me how many people think that this is a quick fix, right? Like tariffs now, U.S. manufacturing tomorrow. And it's just people don't understand the nuances, unless they're like directly involved with the industry. Jeff, so the U.S. president has long claimed that America was wrong not to take advantage of its clout in the world's biggest economy and make other countries pay for access to our market. Do you think that we were kind of like, do you agree with that? And, I think the biggest part of the story is that it's ongoing. It's not over, and it may never be.
Well, yeah, of course he's right.
Yeah.
But you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, you just can't. Some of this stuff is just gone, which is, I hate to sound like a broken record here, but it's why this universal approach doesn't work.
Yeah.
You can't go country by country. It has to be more market by market. What was the stuff with copper again? You said the tariff is going to apply to the raw copper that's coming in?
No, so the tariff is going to apply
to the finished goods
to
or
the
semi-finished
goods, and not on the raw input materials, which is what people were expecting.
Which is odd too, which is, again, sort of feeds into the inconsistencies, because when you look at all of the issues we've had in getting copper mining started or restarted in a lot of places in the U.S., it's hard because of all the environmental concerns. People don't want that in their backyard, that type of thing. So again, I think depending on the day, we could see different results on this type of response from the industry, because it depends on what's being discussed, what's being targeted, what's being enforced on that given day, week, or month.
Yeah.
And it just fluctuates, because in some instances, I get where the 44% who say it can help it are coming from.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a steelmaker and you want to be more competitive, I get it. If you're an automotive supplier that is fighting against stuff coming from Mexico, I get it. But that's where we should focus our energies.
Yeah.
Again, not on everything universally. That's where this falls down. We're just talking about toy folks. We could say the same thing about food importers. We could say the same thing about a number of different industries.
Well, and I mean, not just down to the day, but like down to the hour. You know, what does the news cycle look like as to how people feel about it? The other thing I wanted to mention is that so this poll feature is a relatively new thing that we've rolled out across our sites. Watch for more of them. It's going to be, right now we're working on a new poll that rolls every 24 hours. And let us know what you think of the feature and how it works on the sites. Please email any of us your thoughts, but it's really been, so far, it's been very enlightening, the number of people that have been participating and the kind of feedback that we're getting. It's always good to know how people feel, like almost in real time, All right. Well, before we jump into, in case you missed it, the story is not as popular on our websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. We have another word from our sponsor, Red Zone. This week's episode is brought to you by Red Zone. Watching employees walk away shortly after spending ample resources training them is incredibly frustrating, and while harder to spot, unengaged or unproductive employees also negatively impact the return on labor investment. A new webinar from Red Zone features experts who discuss A, the roots of high turnover in manufacturing, B, how successful leaders support growth for employees, and C, methods for improving operational visibility. I mean, those just sound like winners to me. So watch the webinar, How Coil Specialist Tackled Employee Reliability by, quote, leading well. Download that right now. Let us know what you think. All right, in case you missed it, stories not as popular on our websites like manufacturing.net and industrial equipment news, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, what do you have for us? And in case you missed it.
I selected a story titled Union Pacific and Norfolk Seek First Transcontinental Railroad Through $85 billion Merger. Union Pacific wants to buy Norfolk Southern, and that would create the first transcontinental railroad in the U.S., potentially triggering a wave of additional rail mergers across the country. The implication of this is still kind of TBD, but I think it could be interesting. The combined railroad would include more than 50,000 miles of track in 43 states with connections to both major ports on both coasts. The railways argue it would lower costs and streamline transport. And while analysts agree that that's possible, there's also the potential that there's going to be some service disruptions as well. The industry is reacting kind of in a mixed way. The American Chemistry Council said that the major chemical makers it represents have serious concerns that the deal could reduce rail competition, but other shippers like Amazon and UPS may see benefits of potentially faster and more reliable delivery. They, along with unions and affected communities, will have a chance to weigh in before the U.S. Surface Transportation Board. But adding to that, the nation's largest rail union, which is called SMART TD, has opposed the merger right away over concerns, interestingly enough, that it might jeopardize the progress that Norfolk Southern has made in terms of safety and labor relations since its 2023 disaster derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, an incident that we covered extensively on the podcast. The smaller transport workers union echoed these concerns, saying the deal would deliver billions for Wall Street while workers get shafted. So lots of things in play here. I wanted to raise this one up to bring attention to the fact that it's a story to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's just like a lot of variables there and parties that have vested interest in seeing this either happen or not happen.
Yeah.
So keep your eye on it if you haven't been watching this.
I was kind of surprised too, because this is a deal that could literally impact everyone in our readership, in our audience. And do you think it's because it's rail? Do you think that's why?
That people are kind of like whatever about it. Maybe, or we've seen these like giant mergers in other industries too. I think in the last couple years, the U.S. Steel one is another one where they sit for so long in antitrust review, and it's like you just are like, is it going to happen? Obviously, it would have to go before the board, and it would have to be reviewed for being anti-competitive. So there's just so many other variables involved that you kind of wonder, like, well, will it happen? Do I want to invest too much in getting worked up about it? I don't know.
Well, hey, if there's ever a time to get a deal done and fast-tracked, I think right now is the time.
Might be.
Jeff, what were your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind was how's the unions going to feel about this? Because I think we've seen the impact that they can have in terms of shutting things down and how that impacted a lot of different industries from a logistics perspective. The other thing that came to mind is safety. You could see this going either way. Again, the East Palestine thing came to mind right away. Is this going to help reinforce and help offer more resources potentially towards a more uniformed approach to safety, or because it's bigger and more or less diverse, is it just become a check the box thing and they move forward because they're too big?
Yeah. So
that's what's interesting. I think it'll also we'll see what happens here from a monopoly perspective. If somebody steps in and goes, this seems unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like are they the number 2 and 3 or the 1 and 2? As far as railroads, I know BNSF is in there someplace, but
yeah, I think it's 1 and 2.
Probably. Yeah. So there is another big player in there, but again, that large of a system does create a definite competitive advantage, and we'll see if that's legally plausible or not.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, what is your in case you missed it this week?
All right, I picked a story, and this one went under the radar a little bit. It's Texas A&M is going to study Agrihood living. Okay. Are you familiar with Agrihoods, folks?
I'm not.
Bottom line is we kind of grew up in them. We just didn't know it.
Okay.
So basically what this is, it's a study by Texas A&M where they're going to take a 235-acre living area, and basically ingrain about 100 acres of a working farm. Okay.
Okay.
So there's going to be fields. There's going to be grazing pastures with animals, all of that kind of stuff, along with a lot of other more natural vegetation and things, a lot of walking paths. There's going to be a lot of areas where there's no traffic allowed. The thought is, how does ingraining this type of, I guess you could call it industry, within a normal living space impact people from a health perspective? Because they've looked at it before in terms of, well, anecdotally, we know that this has some health benefits to it, but now let's really dive deep. Let's put 175 people in here that are brand new. Let's bring in 175 people from a neighboring neighborhood that has a similar demographic, but not an Agrihood, if you will. And let's see how this impacts them. They're going to be checking stuff like blood pressure, weight loss, all of these different factors, and see if just being around this type of environment inspires a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah.
I was drawn to it because I wasn't even thinking about that. I just think it's cool that people are going to be exposed to something that maybe they haven't grown up with, like I did. I grew up in a dairy farm community.
Yeah.
I didn't live on a farm, but I was in it. You know, you knew which way the wind was blowing some days. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I also think it gave me an appreciation of what farmers do, the vital role they play in every component basically of our lives and in our country, and just how important industry it is and why it's worth doing a lot of the things that when people talk about a farm bill or they talk about different product pricing or why does the price of milk or why are people dumping milk and it doesn't really resonate. If it's in literally your backyard, you're going to have a greater appreciation for it, as well as a lot of things that we talk about from a technology perspective and the things that are going on there and running that business, that farm like a business. So I was drawn to it for a couple of different reasons. I think the health elements will be interesting to see how that plays out, but more so just from getting people ingrained and having a better understanding of what a working farm is and what that lifestyle is about.
Well, and I think that anyone that's gone back and forth between living in an area with more green spaces and living in an area without, like, I think everyone can agree that if you got more green spaces around you, it's a better place to live.
Yeah, and we'll see if there's actual biological health benefits.
Yeah.
I guess there's like 100 of these types of communities planned around the world, which also kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you to check it out. It's on foodmanufacturing.com. Pretty interesting approach. The picture that they have, I think, is maybe a little bit misleading because it sort of shows like all the fields at one end of the development. Yeah. Whereas I think the plan is to have it more ingrained within the community,
like interspersed,
the living area.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I mean, I know that we've talked about it before, but what is the one thing that like always jumps out on a resume in terms of a person's work ethic? They have any sort of experience working in the ag industry. And your thoughts on Agrihoods and the potential impact they could have, on these communities?
Well, I was looking at the, I guess the other side of the coin, because obviously this, we always like our healthy debates, but did they bring anything up about the possible objections that might come from, the NIMBY folks who are, I know that people in these communities are like being like courted to come in and they're going to choose to come in, right? But like if this were to be rolled out, what about pesticides? What about runoff? What about flies? Like what, what I mean? There's just like, there are a lot of considerations. And I think typically reasons why farms are in like these outlying communities in rural areas because, well, they take up a lot of space to be more, I guess, cost effective to run scale, right? Yeah. And then B, they just have, I
think the fact that, this is pretty small space.
Yeah.
235 acres. You incorporate living areas as well, not very big. So I think a lot of those things are going to be a lot easier to control. You're not going to have 50 cows in that kind of space. So I think a lot of those concerns are quelled that way. Fair to bring up, though, if this wanted to be a larger development with this type of thing incorporated into it. So I think they'll probably figure that out. These folks they're they're study participants. So obviously they're choosing to be there with it.
Yeah.
Are they also in otherwise like fairly depressed areas? Is that where they're trying them? I couldn't
really pick that up. I think they just kind of found an area here that they could design this and try to implement.
Yeah. I feel like if they've found some spots in Detroit, like people would be like, turn it into a field. Anything else? Even there are spots in Madison too, where you're just like, with the premium we have on property, how is that still standing? I don't know. I thought this was a really cool story. And Anna, like just in my experience being at some of those meetings, those not in my backyard folks, they don't care what it is going into the backyard. They don't want it. It could be anything. And anyway, and man, I'm one of them right now. They're like building a new development across the side of the road on the other side of the street. And I'm like, whoa, where'd this come from? What about my beautiful view of the interstate? I'm not going to be able to see that anymore. Not in my backyard, Jeff. But you know what they said? Your time is up, sir. I was just like, all right, thank you for hearing me out. All right. In case you missed it this week, critical nuclear power component maker adds jobs in manufacturing in Tennessee. This was a story on Industrial Equipment News, or IEN.com, that didn't see as much traction as I expected. Last Friday, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee announced an $11.7 million investment by Master Machine to expand manufacturing operations in Chattanooga. Founded in 1993, Master Machine specializes in system design and manufacturing, build-to-print services, obsolete reverse engineering, and complex fabrication, primarily in nuclear-focused industries like nuclear power generation. That guy's still in my head.
Nailed it.
He's still in my head. That was like a year ago. And I don't even say it that way. So I chose the story just because as the United States is seeing a renewed interest in this type of power, I even skipped it right there. I should have just said nuclear power.
You're good.
I think that this is really cool. There are tech advancements like smaller modular reactors that have shown the ability to deliver clean energy and energy security. And Master Machine, they've invested in advanced technology to meet rising demand for these critical components, system solutions, and services. I think this is a big deal. We need to continue to invest in these types of companies that have these types of skills. Some of these new positions are going to be high skill jobs in engineering, machining, and welding. We're going to need this if this is the new infrastructure going forward, and it's important. A lot of the details of this investment weren't disclosed. I always like to see a little bit more in terms of what the community is putting in, and Tennessee just went out of its way to say none of that. But either way, this is a big investment in Tennessee, more jobs, and for an industry that needs it. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to check out this article, but what were your thoughts?
Well, the one that caught my eye is the obsolete reverse engineering is one of the things that they do.
Yeah.
So basically the reverse engineering stuff that people thought we don't need to reverse engineer anymore.
Yeah.
Which, how many times has that come up? Like that's crazy. Like what a great thing to specialize in. I mean, that's kind of amazing. And it just reinforces, I think, all the things you alluded to in terms of the significance and the importance of this company and what they're doing going forward. We are seeing more of these modular nuclear facilities. Again, I referenced it before. A lot of these technology companies that need these AI servers and these big server farms, they're looking for a different source of energy to help with the grid overload. They're turning to nuclear.
Yeah.
So there's a great growth opportunity for this type of company as well.
No, it is. It's incredible how much of that is still out in the industry. And the tools that have been created to sort of scan in these parts, and actually some people that are using AI to create the new CAD files to be able to make a new part that hasn't been made for years. It's kind of wild. Anna, your thoughts on Master Machine and their expansion in Tennessee?
Yeah, I agree that it's cool. We're in this sort of transformation globally towards electricity over fossil fuels. And the goal is not to transition to an electrical grid powered by coal. Doesn't really it's not really making progress. So, to see, as Jeff said, you've got this overtaxed grid and trying to keep up with all these new applications and requirements. Let's spread the wealth here and try to approach that in multiple different ways, so we're not reliant on just one technology in order to service that.
I'm very encouraged by these smaller nuclear modular reactors. I don't know. I think it's really cool. Let's go into final thoughts before we get out of here this week. Anna, what's your final thought?
Oh no,
Jeff, you got a final thought this week before we get to Anna?
Okay. I do.
Yeah.
So if you had to guess, the last thing that I might be doing this last Sunday was super hot, super muggy. If there's one thing I would not be doing,
modeling winter clothes.
Well, I mean, that's fair. Did kind of leave that pretty broad in terms of things to be doing. But
cooking, baking,
going to a Taylor Swift concert.
He's a Swiftie.
I would no. No. You said cooking and baking. You weren't that far off. Actually, one of the things that I love are pickled vegetables.
Okay.
Love it. Especially green beans or dilly beans, as we call them here in Wisconsin.
Beans, yeah.
Yep.
And I love them in my cocktails, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Whiskey drinks. And so my mother-in-law taught me how to can dilly beans on Sunday, which was actually very interesting to kind of go through the process. I'd never done it before. Everybody's got their own recipe and everything else, but start to finish, yeah. And one thing that made me very aware of is I may need to be careful how much I'm drinking. Yeah. Because I throw 2 of these beans into every drink. It's like I gotta burn them through these jars of dilly beans. So I should be a little more careful there. But it was cool. It was cool to learn and do it myself now. So
I haven't had that many drinks this week, but I've gone through 3 jars of dilly beans.
Yeah, what is going on here?
Yeah. No, that's I mean, it was so hot this weekend. Yeah. So how much extra brine did you wind up dripping into that? I was like, just by that last can, did we fill it?
Thankful for air conditioning and fans. Because it's definitely a hotter process for sure.
Yeah. Well, in the same vein of almost dying from the elements, this weekend, my brother and I and our families went to see Tyler Childers at Alpine Valley. And I grew up maybe less than a mile from Alpine Valley. Used to go there all the time. They're just really fun stories of when the Grateful Dead would come to town, people would try to just set up camp on my dad's farmland. And he'd be out there all night trying to run them off. And it was great. But it was just, I haven't been there in a long time. And it was really great to get back to Alpine and just enjoy a really good show outside in the heat, which didn't break regardless of how dark it got. Even though, my brother had kind of scoped it out and he's like, no, there's a tree kind of high up on the left. We get in the shade and we'll be fine. And we set up shop under that tree. And I'm just like, not feeling it. Still no. But it's just great to get out and enjoy music with a a bunch, like a very diverse group of people. And because, he draws like a really interesting and fun crowd. And he does really make it a cool experience where it's very interactive. And I, pretty much like his entire song catalog.
Well, in Alpine Valley, you got to explain it's an outdoor amphitheater and it's a bowl.
Yeah.
So you start high and then the stage is low.
Yeah. They put a stage at the bottom of a ski hill. And everyone's up on a ski hill. And man, don't fall or get moving because you're going. There's this family had this toddler and he kind of started running downhill. I'm like, someone's got to grab that kid. But I just, enjoying music in the sun with family and friends. There's just, no better cure for the soul. Also, Tyler Childers recently put out a new album, and one of his new songs is called Bitin' List. And the lyrics for Bitin' List might be some of my favorites that have come out recently. It's the chorus starts, "To put it plain, I just don't like you. Not a thing about the way you is. And if there ever come a time I got rabies, you're high on my bitin' list." And that is just so great. That is straight poetry. So I was kind of curious, Jeff, who would be at the top of your bitin' list?
Anna, what are your thoughts for final thoughts this week?
Sorry, I really enjoyed it. Anna, final thoughts?
Well, I didn't bring a personal anecdote to the podcast today. I just kind of spaced it. So sorry about that. But I do want to mention that we, as our trio, we're going to be split up for a little while because next week David is gone, the week after Jeff is gone, and then the week after I am gone. So we'll get some really great guest panelists in the way of Nolan Beilstein, Ben Munson, Andy Zoll. But, take a good look at this.
We'll see you in a month.
We'll see you in a month, really, right?
Yeah. A lot of time to really mull over who is at the top of your biting list.
Put that on the flash poll.
You can also,
oh, man.
You can also not think about your biting list. You can forget about it.
It just, it just tickled me. Like sometimes you hear it and you're like, clever, very clever, sir. No, really excited to kind of get those guys back on the pen. I feel like, we had a really good run of Tim Integrity for a minute.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can join us next Thursday when we go live, pending any fires, small or large. All right, for Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.